Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unlocking something usually shrouded in absolute mystery, Freemasonry. But look, before we get bogged down in the lodges and the symbols, I want you to imagine a caterpillar, just sitting there on a single leaf. To that little guy, that leaf is literally the entire world. It just doesn't have the biological equipment to perceive the vast, complex, towering forest all around it. Well, according to the ancient ideas we're exploring today, we're kind of like that caterpillar. We go about our daily lives perceiving just a tiny material fraction of the universe, completely oblivious to this vast forest of unseen realities.
So it makes you wonder, right? Are we like that caterpillar, completely blind to the vast forest around us? The ancient concepts we're diving into today actually suggest that Masonic rituals were specifically designed to deal with these subtle, invisible forces way beyond what our ordinary physical eyes can pick up. We're going to examine exactly how these concepts were codified and, more importantly, what they supposedly do.
Here is our roadmap for this explainer. 1. The historical foundations. 2. A universal religion. 3. Model of the psyche. 4. The spiritual power plant. And finally, 5. The ultimate purpose.
Let's move to Section 1 and see how this builds. The historical foundations.
If we bypass all those modern pop culture rumors for a second, the rapid historical evolution of the craft is actually pretty striking. The term Freemason first pops up in the historical record around 1375, and back then it meant something very literal. It meant a skilled artisan, a freestone mason, who was basically emancipated from local guilds so they could travel around and build magnificent cathedrals. Fast forward to 1717, and boom, we see the foundation of the Grand Lodge of England. This was the official birth of modern speculative masonry in London. Shortly after that, in 1723, Anderson's Book of Constitutions was published, which laid down the philosophical groundwork for the whole shebang.
To really wrap our heads around this shift, we need to contrast two distinct eras. Originally, you had operative masonry. These were literally the guys cutting the stone. And according to their Gothic constitutions, they were strictly loyal to the Catholic Church and medieval doctrines. But by the 1700s, this transforms completely into speculative masonry. The guys building the cathedrals were replaced by gentlemen's clubs. These men were absolutely not cutting stone. Instead, they were heavily focused on humanism, basically taking the tools of the mason and using them as symbols to build a system of universal morality.
Which brings us to Section 2, a universal religion. Now, what's really interesting here is how this desire to unite humanity led to a massive ideological shift. Just listen to this quote from Anderson's 1723 Constitutions. It obliges a Mason to adhere to, quote, that religion in which all men agree, leaving their particular opinions to themselves, end quote. It's wild, because it essentially reduced all those rigid religious duties down to a really simple universal moral law of honor and honesty. Remember, this was a time of intense religious strife. So Masonry aimed to step in as a center of union for humanity, replacing sectarian dogma with a much broader, unsectarian brotherhood. Of course, this pursuit of universal brotherhood eventually hit a wall, leading to a major historical schism. On one side, you have the Anglo-American lodges. They retained a fundamental requirement, a belief in a great architect of the universe, which maintained a sort of vague, symbolical theism. But on the other side, in 1877, the Grand Orient of France took a totally different path. They erased the requirement for a belief in God entirely, declaring their institution completely adogmatic to ensure absolute liberty of conscience. Historical records note this worldwide breach strictly as a matter of fact, but it perfectly highlights how different branches completely reinterpreted the concept of a universal space.
Let's shift gears a bit. Section 3, Model of the Psyche.
All right, so shifting our analytical lens away from history and moving directly into psychology, we come across the work of W. Kirk McNulty, specifically his book, The Way of the Craftsman. McNulty proposes a really fascinating interpretation. He argues that Freemasonry is actually a codification of Renaissance philosophy functioning as a God-centered psychology. Basically, in this view, the lodge isn't just a place to hold a meeting, it's literally a structural representation of human consciousness itself.
To grasp why this matters, we have to look back at the historical mindsets of that era. The dominant medieval view was Catholic scholasticism, which was pretty rigid and super external in its doctrines. But then the Renaissance hits, and it introduces humanism, which placed a massive focus on human free will. The incredible idea here, the real game changer, was that an individual could turn inward, examine their own psyche, and use that very psyche as a bridge to ascend to the divine. McNulty's research suggests Freemasonry essentially bottled up and preserved this highly exalted Renaissance view of human potential.
And we actually see this interior ascent mapped out perfectly in the 3 degrees of the craft. As a candidate progresses, the rituals are designed to systematically awaken and refine their internal energetic channels. First degree, that focuses on controlling physical desires and those lower emotions. The second degree is designed to strengthen your intellectual capacity and mental balance. And finally, the third degree seeks to awaken spiritual intuition, aiming to connect the personal self directly with a higher divine consciousness. It's a very deliberate, step-by-step psychological and spiritual refinement.
Now we're getting to the really deep stuff. Section 4, the spiritual power plant.
This brings us to the most esoteric layer of all, where these rituals aren't just moral metaphors or psychological models anymore. They are literal machines. Drawing from The Hidden Life in Freemasonry by C.W. Leadbeater, we can explore the esoteric mechanics of the craft. Leadbeater argues that the ceremonial work of the lodge is actually rooted in ancient Egyptian practices. According to his view, these rituals aren't just dramatic little plays. No, they are practical spiritual power plants, precision designed to evoke, collect, and distribute actual divine energy. Think of it like this: just as electrical equipment channels electricity, these highly structured ritual movements are said to generate a real, tangible spiritual force.
To understand how on earth this works, we have to define a somewhat unfamiliar concept known as a thought form. When Masons are marching in procession, chanting, moving around the lodge, they are supposedly weaving together an invisible energetic container. Think of it like a giant steam condenser. The whole purpose of this thought form is to hold and concentrate that immense spiritual force generated during the meeting. It basically prevents the energy from just leaking away or scattering randomly out into the neighborhood before it could be properly utilized.
And get this, the physical room itself is a crucial part of this machine. The specific physical layout of the lodge is intensely intentional. Its orientation, the entrance pillars, that famous black and white mosaic pavement, they all represent cosmic dualities, spirit and matter. And because these esoteric theories posit that life force exists throughout all matter, the lodge floor is believed to be crisscrossed with natural magnetic earth currents. So, by following very precise geometric ritual paths, Masons ensure they are moving with rather than against those natural energetic currents flowing through the floor.
So, the crucial point is, why? Section 5, the ultimate purpose.
Why build this massive esoteric machine in the first place? Well, the texts state that high spiritual energy, the stuff sent down by higher consciousness, is actually way too intense for average people to absorb directly. So the ultimate purpose of a Masonic gathering, then, is to act as step-down transformers for humanity. And this brilliantly illustrates the core idea. By gathering in harmony, Masons supposedly absorb this high-frequency divine energy into their own refined subtle bodies. They slow down its intense vibrations, and then they purposefully pour it back out into the world as a gentle, healing blessing to uplift the rest of mankind.
Which brings us right back to where we started, that caterpillar on the leaf. We've explored how these historical concepts describe a highly complex, hidden mechanism for channeling unseen energy. It leaves us with a pretty profound thought to ponder, doesn't it? If this unseen forest of energy truly exists right in front of us, what other invisible forces might be silently shaping our world every single day? Thank you for joining me for this explainer, and keep asking questions.